Evening, everyone. Tonight is Monday, November 4th, and we have a quorum, so I'll call the meeting to order. First, we need to approve our agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our agenda for tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We will now vote to approve our agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Tonight's agenda is approved. Dr. Stanley, would you please review our agenda for the meeting tonight?
Absolutely. So we are going to have excellence in action. Daphne, is excellence in action the pictures? Excellence in action, is it the pictures? I have something to read here. Is that the pictures in the room? Okay. I had something in my mind here. We will have an opportunity to hear from members of the public. Consent agenda. We have a few discussion items. We're getting a report on our social emotional learning. We're getting a report on curriculum. We have several policies, and then for action, the board will vote on graduation requirements related to the new requirement. For financial literacy, we have a READ Act MOU. We have a few collective bargaining agreements that have been settled, and Director Saylor will bring those forward. We have a few policies that we're bringing forward for action, and then we have committee updates, leadership updates, superintendent updates, and we will adjourn. Note that there are items for information in the board packet.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley. Our next agenda item is our excellence in action tonight. And this month, 22 students from Edina High School traveled to Lisbon, Portugal to take part in a global conservation program through the Council on International Educational Exchange. Students actively exchanged in the Portuguese community while learning about how conservation impacts their global community, as well as reflecting on impacts in their local community in Edina. Students Zaina Al-Ramahi, grade 11, Madison Bryan, grade 12, and Lindsay Smaka, the Edina High School science teacher and Edina Rotary Global Scholars Program coordinator, are joining us to share their experiences. Welcome.
Good evening. First of all, thank you, board, so much for inviting us here. We're really excited to share our experience from Portugal just a few short weeks ago. And I have two really awesome students who were on the trip. So I just wanted to highlight, as we go into these travel experiences, we really look at our Edina's portrait of a well-rounded graduate. So when we're designing these, we want to hit as many as we can. And I think as I reflected and put this slideshow together, we really were able to hit on each and every one of them. I designed it here. 3 program goals, 3 main goals. Our first one was science conservation. It was a science trip, learning about conservation specifically in Portugal. As well as global citizenship, what students are doing to impact their community both locally and globally, and then also take part in a cultural exchange and immerse themselves. So I just want to introduce the staff that we had. So it was myself, chemistry teacher and global scholars coordinator, Mr. Eric Burfind, he's our environmental science teacher. We had Jen Carter, our assistant principal at Edina High School, and then we had some fabulous Portuguese staff on site. We had a scientist. His name is Diogo. He's the upper middle picture. He was our resident scientist, has been studying all over the world, and was a great asset. And then we had 3 Portuguese program coordinators. So our first 2 goals, I wanted to highlight with the targets that we were working on while we were there. So the whole program was centered around the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals put forth by the United Nations to achieve by 2030. And we focused on 2 science-focused ones, life below water and life on land. And then those are our 7 targets. And each day we kind of focused on one target, took part in an activity, and then reflected on our experience. So I'm going to have the students talk about all of these targets.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maddie. Our first target was plan and manage all areas to reduce biodiversity loss, and we went and watched dolphins. We learned about how for dolphin watching they have a lot of regulations and like you can't get too close, you can't spend more than 20 minutes with them. And so that was really interesting to learn about and see kind of what they're doing, not only for the dolphins, but also just in kind of that area. And the dolphins swam under us, which was super cool, and they weren't supposed to do that. But and then the drivers of the boat knew all the dolphins based on their fins, which I thought was super cool. So they all had names that the elementary school kids gave the dolphins. So that was really sweet.
Hi, I'm Zaina, and our second target was learning about how Portugal specifically is restoring 30% of all degraded ecosystems. So while we were there, we had the ability to visit a conservation site where lots of conservationists were building sand dunes to help protect the ocean and create a habitat for endangered species. So this was probably my favorite activity because we were able to directly impact the Portuguese community through learning about these sand dunes and how we can further protect the ocean all around the world. So we had the opportunity to paint signs that encouraged protecting these dunes and marine life in general. We also removed invasive species from the area, which was definitely impactful for all the species there. And we also helped engage in ocean cleanup. So there was a lot of plastic, cigarette butts, all disgusting stuff you can think of on the ocean. And we helped clean that up to help restore the degraded ecosystems in Portugal.
This was also my favorite activity, and it really just made me think about, like, in general, the amount of stuff that's just everywhere, like microplastics and cigarettes. Like, even when I got off of the plane and came back into Minnesota, I saw cigarettes on the ground, and it was something I hadn't really thought of before, which I thought was really interesting and connected to my life. Our third target was conserve 30% of land, waters, and seas, and we visited an aquarium. This was super cool to see, like, not only Portuguese animals, but also just like around the world. Our favorite were the sea otters. They were so cute and cuddly. We probably spent, like, I don't even know, a lot of time just watching them. And then we also, over the course of the trip, we answered prompts based on our activities for the day. And for this one, we learned about and researched, like, a different type of animal that's maybe struggling, and that was super interesting. I did mine on seahorses, which not an animal you think about a lot, but it was cool.
So our next target was to learn about how Portugal is trying to halt species extinction, protect genetic diversity, and manage human-wildlife conflicts. So by learning about this, we went to an Iberian wolf center that was centered on protecting the wolves that are endangered in Portugal and all around the world as well. So we learned about how Portugal is trying to ally with surrounding countries, specifically Spain, to protect these wolves and make sure they have a habitat where they can thrive and not be threatened by human activities. And we actually did get to see one wolf in a protected area, which was really cool. I was not expecting us to see it actually that up close, which was really interesting. But we also just got an opportunity to walk and hike through the wolves' natural habitat, which was definitely crucial in learning about how the wolves thrive in the wild, but in a place that they are protected. So that was definitely one of my other favorite activities that we did.
Target 5 was ensure sustainability, safe and legal harvesting and trade of wild species. So we went snorkeling that day, and we got to see the wild species of Portugal in real life and see their habitat. And then on my boat, we actually cleaned up some trash that was left in the ocean, so that was really impactful for me. And we also went to a fish market and saw, like, local harvesting and how that kind of plays a role, and more specifically, like their environment in their village instead of just like mass-produced stuff.
Our next target was to reduce pollution to levels that are not harmful to biodiversity. So on our last day there, we engaged in a forest park, I guess like tour through a very diverse forest in Portugal. And we learned about all the different species that they're trying to protect in this area and across Portuguese forests. We learned about the different birds that they're trying to protect, leaves, trees, all of those kinds of things. And it was really cool to just connect directly with nature and sort of just be one with the environment to really be motivated to protect the ecosystems there. After that, we met a guy named the Trash Traveler, whose mission is to walk along the coast of Portugal and pick up trash to help save the oceans. And to get a little flavor of that, we helped pick up cigarette butts in the forest area and then made art pieces with them, which was really cool to just kind of visualize how we can reduce, reuse, and recycle back at home as well.
Cigarettes, cigarettes, cigarette butts. Cigarettes, cigarettes. This is nuts! Cigarettes contain plastic and toxins. Fishies aren't happy. Please put them into beds. Woo! Yay! Cigarettes, cigarettes, cigarettes.
There we go. He does have 30,000 followers on Instagram, if you're interested in checking that out.
Our seventh target was minimize the impacts of climate change on biodiversity and build resilience. We had a surf class this day. This was super fun and super exciting, even though it was kind of cold. It was really, we had wetsuits, so we were all warm. But being in the ocean like that really kind of changed my mind. And being in Minnesota, you don't experience that, so you don't really think about the impact that we have on the ocean. But even like the surfers there, they all have initiatives to protect it because they spend so much time and a lot of their life in the ocean. So I think that was very beneficial to like experience that and realize that everything I do has such a huge impact on the ocean, and the ocean connects everywhere. So it's important to keep it protected.
Talk about language?
So while we were in Portugal, to just get a glimpse of the language and culture that they use there, we had a Portuguese language class with an amazing teacher that I'll never forget. But he taught us how to say just basic phrases to really immerse ourselves into the culture and respect the language that they use there, and just demonstrate that we are willing to sort of like integrate our mindsets into their culture and not try to reform it. So that was super interesting, and yeah, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, I can. I got to order or like check out what I bought at the fish market in Portuguese, which I thought was really fun for me. And I kind of went into the experience thinking like, oh, they speak Spanish, like I'll be able to do that. But then I found out they don't. And so that was kind of a culture shock thing for me. But it was really cool to learn and see the similarities and differences and just kind of stuff like that.
So while we were there, we again immersed ourselves into the culture through different historical tours of architecture and just important sites that are in Portugal. So on the left-hand side, we went to visit the Palace of Mafra, which was definitely a highlight because we learned about the history of like the Portuguese monarchy and how it became a republic. And then also we just got to walk through this amazing palace with incredible paintings and architecture, which was really amazing. Then we also took a tuk-tuk tour, which are like the little like vehicle, golf cart, motorcycle kind of thing. But that was super fun for me because the driver we had was just hilarious, and she was playing Portuguese music and just connecting with us in a really authentic way. We also visited many different cities, like Setúbal, which was the island we went to for the dolphin watching, and Sintra. And yeah, we just really immersed ourselves into the culture and saw the similarities and differences across Portuguese cities.
Specifically in Sintra, that was where one of the staff spent a lot of his time with his mom going to, can't remember what it's called, but they have a bunch of castles and palaces there. And we really got to hear about the impact of tourism, specifically there, because it's a lot more touristy than a lot of the other places we went. And everything was a lot more expensive. Our staff, Francisco, talked about how when he was a kid, everything was free to the public, and you could go and see the sights and just have a nice day. And now it was filled with people and trash and other things. So that was interesting to hear about the impacts that we have.
This is also kind of tied to science, but the students were able to visit, this is an old gunpowder factory that they turned into an urban conservation haven. So it was a cool way to show students a way we can take an urban site and an old abandoned site and turn it into a place where we can preserve species.
Portuguese food, the little pastry, pastel de nata, is their kind of country food. It was super good, and like I've never had anything like it. And they put cinnamon on it too, which was interesting. I was not expecting to like it that much. And we had a cooking class, and we made tomato soup, which, what did they call it? It was, I don't know. They called it tomato, and I was like not expecting to have tomato soup, but it was really good. And then we made chicken and rice, which like is I feel like a universal kind of dish, but we added a lot of stuff to it and made it kind of a more Portuguese cuisine.
Yeah, and it just really allowed us to get like a taste of Portuguese culture along with everything we were seeing. We got to narrow it down to actually the flavors that define Portugal as a culture. So that was really cool for me.
This is our staff. So there was Francisco, Ronaldo, and Diogo. They were all so sweet and silly, and like we're totally okay to be chatting and having fun. In one of the photos, you can see Bridget trying espresso for the first time after our cooking class. A lot of girls tried it, and they did not like it, but it was definitely like an eye-opening experience. Yeah, they were all super sweet and were really good at immersing us in their ways of life.
Just like very memorable. I won't ever forget the connections I made with the staff there, and I hope I can see them again one day.
Yeah, we've been snapping them about our U.S. activities, and so that's really fun to kind of show them our side, and since they got to tell us about their life.
So while we were there, we got to meet all different kinds of people. Like I met Maddie, for example. I don't know if I would have met her otherwise. But I definitely created connections with other people at Edina High School that will last a lifetime, I hope. But it was definitely impactful to create new connections with people that have different backgrounds and perspectives than mine, and we all had a common interest for broadening our cultural awareness and embarking on this trip to Portugal.
Yeah, just meeting new friends and seeing people in the halls now that I didn't even pay attention to before, and we all like text and we're like, oh my gosh, like we saw this person, or I saw an Instagram post about this, and it's just really fun to have those people that you got so close to in a short amount of time.
So there was lots of impacts for me from the trip. But I think one thing that's really important that I gained from the trip was just a broader cultural understanding of different perspectives. I think in America, we sometimes get a very narrow vision of the cultures that are present. So being able to study abroad really helped me expand my awareness and my conscious of different perspectives and experiences. Again, like I said, I made connections that definitely bettered me as an individual. And I'm super grateful for the cultural exchange that I had, and I hope I get to do it again.
This is my first time going abroad, so this is definitely a very new experience for me. And I just had an amazing time, and I wasn't expecting to have as much fun as I did. And now going off to college, it's really important for me to kind of figure out who I am and where I want to be and what I want to do. And I definitely think I kind of found myself and experienced new things, so I can kind of help shape what I want to do. Yeah. That's it.
Thank you all for coming here to share your experience. I really appreciate it. Sounds like an amazing trip. If you ever need a board member to accompany you, I'll be happy to be first in line. Yeah, exactly. We are going to move on to our hearings for members of the public. Thank you to those of you that are here to address the board. When you signed in and asked to speak, you acknowledged an understanding and adherence to Board Policy 206, which are community comment guidelines. Pursuant to this policy, each speaker has a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. A clock on the screen will be a visual reminder of your time remaining, and I will prompt you verbally if you are going over 3 minutes. When those 3 minutes are up, you must conclude your remarks. This time is not a time designated to address items concerning specific staff or students, and personal attacks by anyone at the podium are unacceptable. If this happens, you will be warned, and if you persist, you will no longer be able to continue your remarks. Any feedback about district employees needs to go to their respective site level leader, the superintendent, or be submitted to the board in writing. The public comment period will be limited to 15 individuals. Per our updated protocols, the school board will give first priority to Edina Public School students, individuals who have children attending school in the district, individuals who reside in the district, or individuals who are employed by the district. The school board will give second priority to individuals who wish to address a specific item that is on the agenda for that meeting. If your form was not filled out completely, you are not eligible to be called to speak. All efforts have been made to ensure multiple viewpoints are expressed. Multiple individuals expressing the same viewpoint or multiple people from the same organization should consider consolidating their remarks. Finally, during public comment period, our role as a board is to listen, but this is not the place for the board to resolve any concerns, and as such, no comments will be made from the board. Issues will potentially be referred to the superintendent for appropriate follow-up. Thank you for your cooperation. I want to make sure we get our clock on the screen. Thank you. I appreciate that. First up, we have Rebecca Malang. And I apologize if I don't pronounce names correctly.
Thank you so much for listening.
Oh, will you turn on the mic, please? There you go.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Hi, my name is Rebecca Malang. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. I have 3 children currently in Edina School District, and today I really want to share Julia's experience, who is my 2nd grader at Normandale. Julia really wanted to come, and she couldn't, so she made me bring a picture, which I will show while I'm talking, because I only have 3 minutes. But Julia, last year, when she was in 1st grade, had lice 4 times in a row. I was losing my mind and didn't know what to do, and it was very expensive. I spent a lot of time talking to other leaders at the school, to the nurse, and to other people, trying to figure out what we could do. I had heard from the experts across the board on lice, talked to many people, that notices were important, because the way we had to stop it was to stop her from getting it from other kids in her classroom that she was getting it from. So I decided to take action into my own hands, and I went on Facebook, on a Normandale Facebook page, and shared that Julia had lice 4 times and asked people to check their children. Within 24 hours, I had more than 5 people, 6 people I guess it was, messaged me privately to tell me that they had checked their child, they were in her class, and they had found lice. One person said they had found all 3 kids that had lice, and they were like, it's pretty bad. And this was great. I was so excited because notices worked, right? I told them it worked. But there was an unintended consequence to that. You see, Julia, who is very strong looking and very happy, also has autism, something that we can't see in the picture. And since she was 3 years old, she'd been working with the Edina School District around things in her plan. And the top thing was about making friends and creating connections with people. In first grade, her top goal was being able to talk to and ask other kids to play with her. She had a goal very specifically to go up to children and say, would you like to play? And a few days after this experience of me putting this online, somebody came up to Julia and she asked them if they wanted to play, and she said, I can't play with you, my mom says, because you have lice. And while that broke my heart, and it is very sad, that is not what I want to leave you with. What I want to leave you with is that this didn't have to happen. We saw that notices worked. Telling people that other kids have lice in their classroom, it motivates people to check their children and find it. And it takes that burden off of the parents to have that conversation and share their specific child's story with people. So that's really the ask, is just to get notices out to people around lice, obviously anonymous, and don't want to share people's names. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jenny Zinn?
Is it on? Okay. Hi, my name is Jenny Shin. I'm a practicing physician and a mother of 3 children, 2 of whom attend Normandale. I'm here tonight to express concerns over the current lice policy, which is notifying parents when there is 3 cases per classroom. I appreciate the effort the district has made to address concerns. However, I feel that it could be improved. The most recent email was in October, and it was titled In the Know, Homecoming 2024 Recap, Kindergarten Information Nights, and more. And that email included new changes, but it was buried within the text and only accessible via a hyperlink you had to click on, and I thought it could be very easily missed. My kids attended Kids Club this summer, and a parent kindly emailed me to notify me that they had lice. I very much appreciated the email so that I could check my kids immediately. I didn't find anything at first. I thought I was in the clear, but it wasn't until 3 weeks later that I found nits in both my elementary age children. So from my research, it can take 4 to 6 weeks after being exposed to lice for symptoms to appear. If we waited for 3 cases in one classroom, that could allow for potentially 12 weeks of lice spreading without any notifications. So notifications to families at that 3 case threshold is far too low a bar for systemic reporting. Furthermore, elementary kids have lunch, recess, kids club, bus together, so reporting by classroom alone can let lice spread even longer. And as you know, a parent started Edina Lice Line in order to anonymously track cases. And data from the Lice Line show that there have been 84 cases reported, but only 3 classrooms exceeded that 3-case threshold. While the Lice Line has been a wonderful parent-run resource, it is likely only capturing a fraction of the cases, and only Edina Health Services can reach everyone in our community. So I propose that new lice policies be sent in a dedicated email where everyone can see the changes, and our school system do their part within our community to report each case of lice that is discovered. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky Kohlenberg?
Hello, my name is Becky Kohlenberg, and 3 of my 4 children attend EPS in kindergarten and 2nd grade. In the last 9 months, my family has dealt with lice 4 times. All of these were separate incidents that were professionally identified and treated. We utilized hats, mint spray, and hair up daily to prevent infestations. Unfortunately, multiple cases of lice within a given year are not unusual for many Edina families. However, my family's experience has been exceedingly challenging because several of my children are neurodivergent with sensory processing differences. The treatment process and disruption to routine brought on by each battle with lice has led to days of emotional dysregulation, meltdowns, anxiety, shame, and difficulty in school. One of my children who struggles with eating issues even became so phobic afterwards that they began to panic at the sight of pepper on food, fearing it to be nits. In case you are fortunate enough not to have dealt with lice, please understand that it's no quick fix. It involves hours of tedious combing and protesting children and countless more hours lost to cleaning, laundry, linen changes, and trips to the lice salon. Each time we have had lice, we are dealt with a difficult choice to make for our single-income family of 6. Take the affordable DIY route, which includes over-the-counter pesticide treatments that studies suggest don't treat the new evolved strain of super lice, or go to a clinic where we are guaranteed results without pesticides for over $1,500 a round for my family. This does not include the cost of treating grandparents who are affected, nor my sister who was unable to round on her patients in a timely manner due to ineffective at-home treatment attempts. I have personally reached out to at least 9 different EPS employees across multiple roles. I asked for support in notifying close contacts, but in every case, this was met with minimizing or refusal, and sometimes my emails weren't even responded to. Not once did someone seek to engage on what an effective response could look like. The lack of policies in place and the district's refusal to promote shame, secrecy, and leave families stranded, and special education students are paying the greatest toll of all. We need EPS to recognize the needs of its community and collaborate with families in addressing this crucial issue rather than leaving us to struggle alone. Notifications are needed for each case in a classroom or group. Teachers may help prevent spread through education and classroom procedures that avoid sharing headphones or layering nap mats. Families also need clear guidance as to where and to whom cases should be reported so that data can be tracked and interventions assessed. Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you. LaShawn James. Will you make sure the microphone's on? There we go. Thank you.
Sorry, I get anxiety in a room full of people. Be patient with me. Okay, I'm LaShawn James, and I have 2 students that attend Valley View Middle School. They also attended Creek Valley, and I want to talk about IEP and diversity. How are you all committed to individuals in your district that are not meeting grade level requirements? Do you guys participate in equity inclusion? What are we doing to make diversity normal in District 273? Also, when it comes to IEP, I'm curious about the amount of funding per child. Also, I'm curious about what is this funding moving forward towards. I also would like to talk about racism and how it's affecting the students and us being in 2024 and as a team moving forward to try to make it better for all students because we live in America and we diversity. Also with children with IEPs, understanding to make sure that we are keeping up with that and making sure children are feeling a part of their IEP and that they're succeeding so they can succeed mentally. I depend on this board. I have 3 children that attend with you guys and the people that work under you and the accountability that is had for them and the looking over things that is happening. And I'm asking the board to review those things and to try to make sure that the teams that put in place for them are making sure they're followed through, so that the Edina district continues to have the look for the IEP students to still meet standards and to at least get there at some point, not get into high school still in a 6th grade level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. James. Claire Hanneman?
Good evening. Like many here tonight, lice has graced my family's doorstep 3 times in the last 8 months. I have 2 daughters in elementary school, 2nd and 5th grade, and had never had lice prior to this past spring. Like many others, I have spent hundreds, probably close to $1,000 on treatment, attempting a balance between the guaranteed but costly lice ladies and the at-home remedies. So I wanted to use my 3 minutes just to take a step back and make sure that the board is really aware of what we're talking about. The lice today is not the lice we grew up with. Super lice was a media coined term in 2015, but it has a scientific definition and denotes a very real difference in the lice of today than when we were younger. Like bacteria that has grown resistant to antibiotics, researchers have found that 98% of lice in the 48 continental states are genetically mutated to be resistant to the over-the-counter treatments like Nix. A study done more than 23 years ago showed that the effectiveness of those drugstore over-the-counter treatments can be as low as 28%. So to make matters worse, did you know that for most of a louse's life, they're actually clear nowadays? And while preparing to speak tonight and researching, I've learned that the lice can actually change color over their life cycle to blend in with the host's hair. Lice used to be closer to the size of a sesame seed, and nymphs and nits now can literally be microscopic. I know this firsthand as my daughter last spring kept scratching her head, and I kept checking for lice. And I used a nit comb, and I checked for lice, no lice. She went to a scout sleepover. Another parent called and said, my daughter has lice. I checked, my daughter has lice. But I've learned that the itching associated with lice is like a mosquito bite. You know, it's the saliva that makes your skin itch. Well, so a person's allergic response can be very different. You can have asymptomatic lice, or you can have people who, like my daughter, had an itch, but they only have an itch after several weeks of having an infection. Pun intended, this problem is not a head scratcher. COVID taught us that disease spreads in the absence of information and understanding. I am imploring the board to help us pull back this veil of secrecy around this topic, remove the stigma. Spreading the word will help keep our students in school, our wallets reserved for better things than lice treatments, and us parents will stay out of y'all's hair. We humbly ask that the school district report for each case in each classroom anonymously when there is a report. When there is more than one case in a grade, please send a grade-wide notification. Since as previously stated, elementary students attend lunch, recess, and kids club, not by grade. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tim O'Neill?
Hello, thank you all. My name is Tim O'Neill. My wife Annie and I have 4 kids, 2 at the high school and 2 at Southview. First, I wanted to thank you all for sitting and listening and allowing people like us to speak for 3 minutes. What I wanted to talk about tonight was something different. I wanted to respectfully request that the school board and the administration reevaluate the way that Edina High School handles academic honors. Since we have 2 sophomores at Edina High School, we're learning that while the high school does many things really, really well, we're also learning that the high school is an outlier when compared to neighboring public and private high schools with the way it awards or does not award academic honors and distinction. Based on what we've learned, this falls into 3 main areas: National Honor Society, awarding an academic letter, and recognizing students for academic success in the form of an honor roll. First, National Honor Society. After calling around to the top 20 Minnesota high schools, I was super surprised to hear, with the exception of one small private high school, Edina was the only high school that didn't offer National Honor Society. And while there is a volunteer letter at Edina High School, which is great, it does not offer the other 3 pillars of National Honor Society. Second, awarding the high school's top learners with an academic letter annually. Edina Scholars is a great program, but it's not offered until graduation, and most juniors applying to colleges can't list that, so we would offer that academic letter be expanded to annually. Finally, reinstating the A and B honor roll. It used to exist in Edina, and while I don't want to use Minnetonka as an example, they are a great leader right on their website for academic honors. They list National Honor Society, honor rolls, academic lettering, and they still use the Laude Latin model, even though they also don't do valedictorians, which I think is fine, which Edina has not done for a long time. I think we should reward all of our students. I couldn't think of any other student club, whether it's athletics. The soccer team won it all last year, didn't win it this year, but those girls and boys and all students are awarded annually when they do something great. I think we should focus on our strategic plan and on academics and reward those kids that are working hard and give them an award annually because it helps them motivate to keep doing better, which will make Edina better. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. Heather Heltla.
Hello, my name is Heather Heltla. I'm an Edina resident and proud Countryside Elementary parent. Like many families in our community, mine has also dealt with lice this year, and I'm here tonight to advocate for a more family-friendly lice notification policy. Yes, lice is absolutely always out there in the community, especially in the elementary setting, but that doesn't mean we should sit by and be complacent about trying to stay ahead of it. Lice isn't harmful in the way many infectious diseases can be, but it does take a big toll on families in several ways: time, expense, and a lot of anxiety. I've spent some time benchmarking with parents in neighboring school districts. As you can imagine, the lice notification process is truly all over the board. Some parents in say their districts don't notify and they wish they did. Other parents, like a friend in West Tonka, gets a notification every time there is a reported case of lice in their child's grade. The school nurse at Hilltop Primary in West Tonka sends the notification, which includes information on what to look for and how to treat, as well as the following ask. If you should discover a case of head lice, please notify Mrs. Cray, the school nurse. This is the best way to protect your family and your community. Another friend at Glen Lake Elementary in the Hopkins district also receives lice notifications when there is more than one reported case in their child's grade. This notification comes from Nurse Judy McDermott Beatty and includes an attachment about lice as well as tips on how to manage through treatment and prevention. A nurse in the White Bear Lake School District sends notifications and said, "We listened to our parents and designed a process that best meets their community needs." A Minnetonka school nurse who sends notifications stated the following: "Unlike strep, parents don't always know about lice because they travel quietly and then suddenly everyone seems to have it." My ask today is that Edina Public Schools reconsiders their policy on lice notifications. A better system would include encouraging parents to notify anonymously anytime they have discovered their child has lice, and that the school nurse sends out a notification to their class, as well as a notification when there is more than one reported case in any given grade. Notifications are invaluable when it comes to improving awareness and enhancing prevention efforts. I'll close by acknowledging that this is an additional ask of the EPS Health Services, and I recognize that school nurses are extremely busy and already stretched very thin. However, implementing an improved lice notification system will greatly improve the experience of children and families in the Edina School District. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Caroline Dixon.
Good evening, members of the school board. My name is Carolyn Dixon, and I have a kindergartner and a second grader in the district. I'm here tonight to advocate for district-wide lice notification. Just as we are notified about strep and flu cases, I believe lice notification should be standard practice as well. The lice line that was started by an anonymous parent fills a crucial need in our district, but it shouldn't be the responsibility of one parent to monitor the situation for everyone. My family faced a lice infestation at the end of August, which cost us nearly $800 for professional treatment. On top of that, we spent countless hours vacuuming, washing, bagging, and freezing things while also notifying friends and family to get checked. It was an isolating experience for us. By not doing more to notify families, we risk allowing the level of cases to continue unchecked. I urge you to consider implementing district-wide lice notifications to better support our families and create a healthier community for our children. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sarah Paisley.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Paisley. I'm the mom of 2 Normandale students, a full-time working parent, a room parent, a French intern host parent, and volunteer. My family moved to Edina 3 years ago, primarily for the exceptional public schools. I'm proud to say I'm from Edina, my kids go to EPS, and I appreciate the work you all do to keep our district excellent. Just sitting here tonight, I know you all deal with serious problems with complex solutions all day, every day. I'm imploring you to appreciate that this lice outbreak is a serious problem, but fortunately, we have a pretty simple solution that we're proposing. I'm here as part of this group of concerned parents asking the district to please reconsider your policies around lice and specifically to start reporting each individual case to help us stop the spread. I won't go into my story over the last 6 to 8 months because it's fairly similar to the ones you've heard already, but safe to say we've experienced multiple outbreaks in our house. I've spent hundreds of dollars trying to deal with this and many, many days of my time. Unlike the flu or strep throat, lice can go undetected on a kid's head for months and spread unseen through classrooms, grades, and school. There's no end in sight, unfortunately, unless the district is willing to take a more active role. We do not expect EPS to make lice go away. What we do hope is that you will consider the simple ask and take a small element of this burden, notifying our peers, off the plates of your responsible, caring, and busy parents. Despite the underground efforts of many of us here, most parents still do not recognize the severe break that's happening in Edina right now and the need to vigilantly check our kids to hopefully curb the spread. This is not what we in Edina want to be known for. Please help us amplify our voices. Thank you.
Thank you. Lara Lukens.
Hi, I'm Laura Lukens. I have 3 kids, including an EPS second grader and kindergartner. 2 months ago, I spoke to you about the lice outbreak and asked the district to send anonymous notifications for lice, just like you do for flu or strep. I didn't expect to be back here or want to be. No offense. Being Edina's lice lady isn't quite the look I'm going for. I also have such respect for all of you and never wanted to bring forward a problem with no solution. You've got enough of those. Notifications for lice seemed like an easy way to address a major issue for Edina families. Unfortunately, nothing about the last 2 months has been easy. Families continue to struggle with lice, and the district continues to resist parents' attempts to collaborate on a response. At first, I understood your hesitation. Parents were sharing evidence that was anecdotal, and this district makes decisions based on data. But then a parent started a case-tracking website called Edina Liceline. 508 elementary families have signed up for notifications, reporting 84 cases in a school year that's just 2 months old. This data proves that the outbreak is real and that parents value notifications. The district responded with a policy change that didn't actually lead to real change. And you made one thing clear: your hands were tied. The MDH, the CDC, the AAP, they prevented you from sending the notifications that parents ask for. When I asked for clarity on these policies or for a meeting to discuss further, I was dismissed. I looked for answers myself, and here's what I learned: those policies don't exist. I called the MDH. Here's what their school nurse advisor said about lice notifications, and this is a direct quote. MDH doesn't say anywhere that you can't notify. We don't have a stance one way or the other. It's a local decision. The CDC and the AAP take the same neutral stance, end quote. I'll ask you to check your email for the name of this MDH employee and for more detail on the ask we're making. So here's where we are now. Families don't feel heard. The district is misrepresenting policy. A parent is running a website to do the job of your health office. And nearly everyone in this room has spent far too much time on an ask that was never intended to be burdensome. Sending notifications was and still is achievable. It won't solve the lice problem, but it's an easy way to help. If you disagree, that's okay, but please talk to us, meet with us. We want to collaborate. We are 500 strong, and we are waiting to be heard.
Thank you. That concludes our community comments for tonight. Thank you to everyone that took time out of their night to come and speak to us. And we're going to move on to the rest of our agenda with our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
I should have asked first. Is there anything anyone would like to remove from our consent agenda? And then Karen motioned to approve our consent agenda. Do I have a second to approve our consent agenda? All those in favor of approving our consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Hearing no opposition, the consent agenda has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have very touchy microphones. Now we're going to move on to our discussion items. Oh, before we move on to our discussion items, I just wanted to point out, as part of our consent agenda, that we were approving our National Merit Scholars, and I just wanted to make sure that I took a moment to recognize that we had 30 National Merit Scholar semifinalists and commended students, and I didn't want that to go unnoticed, and I wanted to make sure that they got the commendation of the board and the community for their amazing achievement. So that was approved as part of our consent agenda, and I just wanted to pull that out and make sure they were recognized. Now we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Our discussion item. This is what happened when I skipped dinner. Our first discussion item is our social and emotional learning update, and I'd like to invite the Director of Teaching and Learning, Jody D. St. Hubert, up. And is Leanne here? Okay. So just Miss Director D. St. Hubert.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Stanley, Chair Allenberg, board directors, community, and colleagues. Yes, Leanne Feely is not able to be here with me tonight because she is homesick with bronchitis, I think. So I have notes from her and have worked with her throughout the process with this SEL update. So I'm happy to present the highlights and then hear from you the feedback and questions that you have. And we'll do some follow-up directly with her as she leads this project. In March, it was March 26, 2024, we provided an SEL update for the board. SEL stands for, as we know, social and emotional learning. Since the March update, Edina was awarded 2 grants in the winter of 2024. Leanne Feely and Anne-Marie Leland worked very closely together to get those grants, and they're instrumental in helping support the continuous improvement in the area of SEL. The first grant is a multi-tiered systems support grant, which supports the district in implementation of MNMTSS. The second grant is a non-exclusionary discipline grant. Funding for this grant supports the development and implementation of a professional learning plan for school staff to implement non-exclusionary discipline practices that maintain the respect, trust, and attention of students and help keep students in the classroom so that they are able to best learn. Utilizing consistent Tier 1 SEL practices and curricula fits with the broad umbrella of non-exclusionary practices. So one of the biggest outcomes of the grants was that we were able to start a Tier 1 SEL team, design team, which was created in the spring of 2024. The team is currently in exploration phase of the implementation science process and has determined 5 outcomes that are outlined in the board report. And those outcomes are goals that they're working towards. Each building has at least 1 representative on this SEL team, that the design team that's working together. And we also want to note that there's representation from community education to ensure that our Tier 1 SEL efforts are extending to places such as kids clubs and community ed classes as well. In the spring, the team was able to meet 1 time, but did some really critical and important work grounding in their goals together. And they determined the following 5 statements to be the team's vision for SEL. And those 5 statements are also outlined in the board report. Working towards the first outcome that they determined of articulating and aligning SEL outcomes for all EPS students, the team did a deep dive in a couple of areas. Those areas are the 5 CASEL SEL competencies, the Minnesota SEL standards, and then also culturally proficient school systems essential elements. And the Tier 1 SEL team worked from the definition of culture aligned with Edina CPSS work, being that culture is shared beliefs, values, traditions, social norms, and behaviors of a group of people who share the same, or who share the same living environment. And that quote is in the board report and noted that it's by, and I don't know how to pronounce these last names correctly, so I'll say that right away, Naik, Baka, and Mohide Ini. The Tier 1 SEL team will be meeting 4 times this year to continue the work towards the 5 outcomes that are listed in the board report. And the immediate next step that they will be working on is determining best practices for SEL data collection in our schools. And the other part of the NED grant, and that's the non-exclusionary discipline grant that's highlighted in the board report, is caring and committed conversations. And the caring and committed conversations are being worked on in collaboration with Dr. Franny Becaire through partnering with Sarah Miller and Malik Peer from Jordan, Minnesota, in the public schools, and some work that they have done throughout that community. And this is a training that is in the process of valuing diversity and honoring differences and celebrating commonalities through specifically elevating student voices. The last little bits to highlight are that the staff has received some professional development on that, and I believe we've engaged in our first conversation with students just recently, and the goal for Edina High School is to have 2 caring and committed conversations taking place one before winter break, which I think is the one that just occurred, and one after spring break. So with those highlights of the work that's happening with SEL, knowing that there's a lot more work ahead of us, and open it up for feedback and questions.
Board members, what feedback and questions do you have? Director Gabler?
Thank you for this report, and thank you to Leanne too, because I know she's really instrumental in our work here. I did want to draw, just for those listening, back in October, we had an opportunity to hear our data metrics. And in our data metrics report, we receive our panorama data, or we get to see it, or it's woven in there. And there are some social emotional learning benchmarks that we use, and there's some highlights in there that I thought were really we're celebrating. One of those being that one of the questions that our students get asked is, do you have an adult that cares about you? And we, across the board, with all of our student groups, age, culture, like they were very high. So I wanted to mention that because this is an area that we're committed to. It's an area that we've shown some really great results in. Can you talk a little bit more about how the high school settled on caring and committing conversations as to pilot it? And my question comes from, usually we as a board get to kind of understand, like, we've vetted these couple different ideas and this is how we settled on this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm wondering, Dr. Becaire, do you want to speak to that just from where you are even? Thank you. Appreciate it.
So with caring and committed conversations, how we landed on it, when we began writing the grant, I had in my previous role in my previous district, I had led a very similar process with creating a student equity group and training the students how to lead this work and have conversations with each other. What happened is taking on all of the work with the tools of cultural proficiency and all the training that I'm doing, my capacity to work directly with the students and train them became incredibly limited. I am part of a group that's called Metro Area Equity Leads. And we meet once a month and we talk about ways that as equity leads within the metro area that we can support each other. I had heard about Sarah and Malik and their work. They work with actually quite a few districts. Jordan, Osseo, some across the river, leading caring and committed conversations. So we met with them. So I brought the idea to Anne Marie and Leanne and said, I'm going to be honest at the end of last year where my capacity is with this. We need to bring this work to the high school. I do not have the capacity to lead it in the way that we thought we originally did. After a pretty thorough vetting process, so I met with them, then the team met with them, then we actually went and met with them at the high school. After all of those conversations, we felt, okay, this is aligned with the grant. This is what it is aligned with what we originally wrote in the grant and carries forward that action step. So that is how we aligned with caring and committing conversations. Great question.
Thank you for that. And as we pilot this, will we be using similar to what we've seen in the past in terms of a rubric of how we're measuring its efficiency, what our students are saying about it, what teachers are saying about it? Can we expect that?
Absolutely. In fact, we already have a little bit of feedback from the adults in the first adult PD session, and so that's anecdotal right now, but it's important. So we're always gathering that feedback, and we will absolutely put a more concrete process in place.
Great. And then my second question. So I really appreciate Franny's explanation there, and I know that as a district, we're very committed to using the lens of CPSS through everything we do, whether we're choosing a social studies curriculum, whether we're choosing. When I read the report, I think that was very forward front for me, which I think is important, but I think I didn't see a lot of some of the kind of the known entities of social emotional learning that even in the report where it talks about linking to what is it? The 5 CASEL SEL and the MDE SEL standards. Like SEL is about managing emotions, empathy, helping students make responsible decisions. I didn't see a lot of that in that high school curriculum, so I just was curious if that is, if we've kind of taken another route on how we're viewing SEL or where that was in this.
Great
component.
question. And when you say high school curriculum, do you mean the
Well, I
caring
mean
and
this
committed?
caring and committing, because I know that
Yes.
what we've, like what are we using in elementary is character strong, or at least what we're piloting.
Yes.
And that is very much those kind of tentacles of
Yes.
social emotional. It's hitting on all of those.
Yeah.
And I didn't see those tentacles in the report, nor in kind of how the caring and committing classrooms was explained.
So I think that's a really good clarification. I'm glad you're asking that. So the caring and committed conversations is not necessarily a curriculum that we're looking at for SEL, the high school. It's a strategy right now that we're leaning into for the professional development of non-exclusionary discipline practices. So the SEL team, as a K through 12 with some contact with early learning, because they're critical in this conversation, as well as with community education, are still working on what that curriculum will be across the district. And so although we have some elementary piloting in Character Strong, because the committee has literally only met twice now, we're still very much in that exploration process. So great question. Very important that I note that caring and committed conversations is not there for a curriculum. It's more part of that non-exclusionary grant, and that we'll hopefully be able to provide more updates at another point on where we're at with that curriculum.
So it's a small subset of that bigger umbrella of social emotional?
Yes.
Are we, what are we doing for social emotional learning at the high school? Like, are we looking for a curriculum
Yes,
for that?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. We're continuing to, Character Strong was piloted at the high school, so it's not that is off the table, right? The group is definitely committed to a layer of consistency and naming this, in the consistency being, they haven't determined what that consistency exactly is yet, except that they'll be consistent in the CASEL strategies that you're talking about. And there's very specific language in our strategic plan that aligns with those CASEL strategies. So I think, if I'm remembering correctly, those were on about the second page of the report. So it talks about applying the social emotional competency of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making as outlined in the strategic plan. Yes, we're absolutely looking at that for secondary in a curriculum.
Perfect.
What that
That's
will
what I
be
wanted
yet,
to make sure we
don't
were
know.
not, okay, thank you.
Yes, great question.
So Director D. St. Hubert, I had a similar question in teaching and learning, and this reminds me a lot about the very beginning of when we were working on our literacy plan. And there's so much good work going on. It can be really hard as board members and as a community to know what are we talking about and where is it? What part are we talking about? And I'm wondering if when we see presentations similar or any information similar to how you sort of ended up breaking out a lot of the stuff with the literacy plan to sort of give us markers of, even if you look at the SEL team updates, and these are the 5 things we're working towards. It's like every single time we see an update, which one of these markers does this have to do with?
That's great feedback.
Because I think that would just help so much when board members and community members that aren't in this every single day can know, oh, this is in this bucket.
Yes.
Oh, this is in this bucket.
Yes.
Because if you don't see it, if you see it every 6 months and you're trying to remember back,
I know.
I just think that'd be really helpful from an organization perspective and reduce a lot of the questions.
Great feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Director Bergman, I just wanted to inject that.
We're going along the same lines. The only thing I would add to that would be, in this report, it doesn't quite give us the kind of forward timeline of when things will come back. To that point, that even if it's 6 months, or more importantly, even for this current school year, are we anticipated to get something by April or whatever it might be? When we think about that, I think that just sets the expectation of, as the team is working through this process of understanding and trialing out different things and so on, and the learnings that we're going to take from that, when will we and the community know, like, okay, here's the kind of timeline that's going to happen from that? I'm not necessarily saying we need a Gantt chart that shows all of those different elements, but I think it's sort of setting the expectation of this is the kind of general time cycle we're on. I think that would then help people when they read something like this that doesn't necessarily explicitly say that. It's like, okay, they're working on it. They got 3 more. They've only had 2 meetings. They're going to have 4 more or whatever it's going to be. When it's completed after those 4 meetings happen, this is when we would anticipate coming back, and this is what we learned, and here's how we're leaning into that next process. That might be helpful when it's a little bit abstract at the moment, and it will get more specific as we go along. I think we generally understand that, but I think it's hard to retain that information without some stakes in the ground that, like, okay, we should anticipate around this time, this is what's going to happen.
Great.
Any other questions from board members, comments? Great, thank you. And I believe you're here next for the next update, which is a curriculum update.
Yes, yes, thank you, Chair Ellenberg. The next update is a curriculum update. This is specifically worked on, I want to acknowledge Bethany Van Onsdal, our Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning, and Mark Carlson, who's our K-12 Science and Math Coordinator. This report was done in collaboration with them, and truly the work that's reflected in the report is done under their leadership. So I want to acknowledge the incredible work they're doing and supporting throughout our district. So this curriculum update begins with an overview, really grounding in implementation science in alignment with Policy 603 and the formation of district design teams. So we just alluded to design teams, or the SEL team that's working together, and that's what's happened in all of these curriculum updates. A design team was formed, and it's most often formed during a curriculum review that's prompted by a change in Minnesota standards in a specific content or subject area. Not always, but that's often the case that prompts a design team to be formed. The 3 areas in this report which have recently been reviewed and or are still, well, they all are still in process, but at different stages of process, are science, ELA, and social studies. And so what we did in outlining these subject areas, we started with science because, as you'll see, there's a chart that takes us through the years, and that started pre-COVID in exploration and got a little bit, it got interrupted and kind of ebbed and flowed in the implementation science phases, which I do want to note, they aren't always linear. It feels very linear, but sometimes things happen where we go back and forth. But science started in 2019, and then the chart really shows you how we've gone through exploration to installation to initial implementation to full implementation. This year is when the new MCA assessments for for aligning with the new standards actually occurs. So you see the material purchases in that chart as well, and that's broken down K-5, 6-8, and 9-12 for science. Then at the end, or at the beginning of each of those sections is just really an overview of what that's looking like in the current phase. So for science, it highlights what each level is doing and how they're doing with full implementation. Early learning through 12 is language arts. We're very intentional with our comprehensive literacy plan as part of our strategic plan to include early learning in that. And same thing is happening in a chart there where that review started in 2021. And we are moving towards implementation. You'll sometimes see in the charts that the elementary might be at a different phase than the middle school, and the middle school might be at a different phase than the high school. So it's a constant collaboration with these design team members and our professional staff, and ebb and flow on what the support they need is. And then social studies is the last area that's updated in there for you. And we're really right now in exploration at the 6-12 level, and a little bit of exploration to installation still in our elementary levels. So the Appendix 1 just notes lots of names, trying to highlight, I mentioned that Bethany Van Onsdal and Mark Carlson are critical in leading this work, but what they do is facilitate all of these staff members that are involved to come to decisions on how, not only what we're going to purchase, but that next absolutely most critical step of how we're going to implement it and support it through full implementation. So What questions and feedback do you have for the curriculum update?
As a non-TNL member of the board, this is excellent because it gives me a nice framework of the different elements that are then there. I think it's a very concise report to show that. And in this case, right, you are getting that sort of timeline. That's exactly kind of what I was trying to say in the last part.
Yeah.
That really does help kind of see how that's progressing along from that standpoint. So for me, even though I'm not in those conversations on a regular basis, it helped me track where that was going. So I just wanted to say that as a non-teaching and learning committee member, this definitely met my needs for understanding. Thank you.
I think it's helpful both as a board and as a community, like you said, to ground us, and then also when we're looking at data and we're understanding the science of curriculum implementation, when we're shifting things, understanding, like full implementation takes multiple years, and then understanding this is exactly where we are across multiple subjects. It's hard to ground yourself. I mean, I can't remember it. So having this I found very helpful, and I appreciate you doing that. Director Gabler?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank you and all the teachers that are piloting new curriculum, because it is a heavy lift and it's a multi-year process. And as your report states, staff are currently experiencing a balance of both challenge and successes. This is expected, but you kind of find out, oh, we got to supplement this part of it, or this doesn't quite work like we wanted. And so I just wanted to call that out because that's a heavy lift for staff.
It absolutely is. I've shared with many of you, maybe not all of you, maybe TNL board committee in particular, but I got the opportunity to sit in the middle school PD on our October session that we had, and it was on the new curriculum, Study Sync, and it was a really good reminder for me as to what a big change that is for staff. There was so much positive energy in it, and it just takes time. It takes time to learn it and takes different support. So I appreciate you acknowledging how much how dedicated our staff are in the process.
I think it's also a key thing to remind parents and community that as these things happen, we're also getting data through the panorama process to see how things are actually going at the individual student level, and where do we then need extra supports or other things for any student who's falling through the, I don't want to say a crack, but more of like they're not quite at the standard that we want to have. That data is then helpful, and the tools and the skills that are being offered to the teacher and the other staff members to help with that. This all part of, as the curriculum continues to evolve, we have those mechanisms in place to help identify if for whatever reason there's a subset of our student population that's not quite connecting with that, how do we then address that?
Very good point. And staff just continue to level up on how they are collecting data and responding to it and teaming. So it's really very good point. Thank you for noting that.
Great, thank you, Director St. We're going to move on to our policy review. I'll turn it over to Policy Chair Gabler, Director Gabler.
Thank you. We have several policies up for discussion tonight, and first I'm going to call up Assistant Superintendent Nate Svensson, and Nate has a number of policies that he is going to take us through, or just two policies actually, 501 and 502.
Director Gabler, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Stanley, thank you. The first policy that we're taking a look at is Policy 501, School Weapons Policy. And just to begin, this policy was reviewed by myself and principals and our Emergency Management and Safety Coordinator, Alex Hatstrom. Some of the changes being proposed in the document, one, was frankly a little bit difficult to understand, and it was about the flammable liquids one. And I think I have a better understanding now, but this section of the policy defines and prohibits flammable liquids that could be used as weapons or to create incendiary devices, while being careful not to inadvertently ban something common like hand sanitizers or perfumes or something like that. So we also are proposing to tighten up the language around who has the authority to allow for a dangerous weapon to be on campus. And just to be clear, what that would mean is if there was a play taking place at a school and one of the cast members was asked to bring in a look-alike or replica weapon, that there would be certain individuals in the district who could approve such a move as that. And we're proposing that that be superintendent, assistant superintendent, principals, and then the director of early learning. And then finally, there is one part of the policy that I am still getting clarity on, just to make sure it's not an additional reporting policy about dangerous weapons in school zones. But that was an additional piece that was added to the policy.
Board members, before we open up for questions, I don't need to state this to you, but I'm going to. We obviously have the Constitution that we have to work around here. So, you know, as you read this and have questions, I mean, we had a big discussion at policy around what can and cannot happen. And Alex Hatstrom, as you mentioned before, was a huge help of bringing kind of some clarity to some of that. So does anyone have any questions? Director Barry.
I have a question about the Section 4 Part D, firearms in school parking lots. Because I was kind of surprised to learn when I was reading this that we may not prohibit lawful carry of firearms in a school parking lot. And it just brought to mind, you know, around the country, we were seeing more and more issues in parking lots after sporting events. And thankfully, we have not had issues with that here. But if we are not allowed to prohibit firearms there, and I see the policy is that, you know, any person with a permit can't have it beyond the vicinity of their car, but I think we're way past caring about policy if someone is in that situation. I don't know if Director Hatstrom had any thoughts on that, or if this is just something we should keep in mind as we're talking to lawmakers as part of our advocacy this winter.
Yeah, we really dug into that as well, and Alex brought that to us as well. It's state statute, and we went through the state statute with a fine-tooth comb to see if there were any ways that we could move beyond that. And the key word there is if they have a license for conceal and carry or to have a gun. It needs to be in their vehicle. Yeah, and we just looked deeply into that to determine whether or not if it was on school grounds, but as long as it's in their vehicle, then there is nothing we can do about that.
I would just add too that this is language from MSBA too. So it is, it's not specific to Edina, but is very broadly applied to policy in schools.
Excellent question, and to answer your question, taking it up with our legislators might be the right route, because your response was the same as my response. They kind of had to peel me off the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I have a comment and a question. My comment is, I appreciate the definition, the additional definition. Since we did such a good job defining specifically what a dangerous weapon is, I guess I'm struggling with 4A with the exceptions. I absolutely can understand the exceptions when it comes to look-alike weapons or like box cutters and things like that. I'm struggling with us making an exception with a student that brings a dangerous weapon, whether it's intentional or not. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I just, someone having a gun, a loaded gun, I think it takes some level of awareness to be carrying a gun and a dangerous weapon. And I think it's easy to say, I didn't know I had that weapon on me. I personally would preclude dangerous weapons from our exceptions policy.
Yeah, I think if I could just add more context around that. First of all, I feel like I understand where you're coming from and why it can be alarming. The situation I'm thinking about is a student who, for a lack of better words, they're out doing some type of an activity and there's something in their backpack that they forgot about, and that student comes and self-reports it to an administrator. Honestly, aside from keeping that at home and never having it on them, that's exactly what we would want the student to do. And it would be really challenging as an administrator to then med out discipline with a student like that when they are essentially kind of doing what they should be doing, acknowledging they shouldn't have it on them. So I think it's complicated is all is what I'm saying. And I would hate for our building leaders to be put in a position where a student comes and self-reports and then we met out discipline on top of that. I think that could be tricky.
And some more context in our conversation in policy committee was you talked about rural Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
So you said like a student's doing activity, hunting,
Yeah.
and they don't take their rifle out of their truck. Now, we're city people, so that's sometimes a little bit of a stretch for us to imagine that, but for those who have worked in rural Minnesota, it's real. A lot of our policy is taken from MSBA because of the legal consequences of it. What gave me a little bit of comfort in that same question was our policy 506, which is our discipline policy, which under no circumstances, you bring a weapon to school, you're gone. And so this gives a little bit of grace that if that administrator is like, that child does have a cabin and I don't know, or they find something in the bushes. I hear what you're saying. It'd be very easy for a student to say, I found this. But if they're bringing it, I think that's where we have to trust that our administrators would have to dig in and realize like, that's not what really happened there.
And I appreciate your point about wanting students to do the right thing. So if it ultimately creates an environment where it's keeping our students safer, I didn't look at it from that lens, so I appreciate that feedback. It's this whole thing is not pleasant to talk about. So thank you for clarifying that. My question, actually, you addressed a little bit, was about the B8, about the possession of dangerous weapons, BB guns, and replica firearms need the written permission of a superintendent and assistant superintendent. Again, would this fall in an example of like a student after school is going to go pheasant hunting? I'm just trying to think of any instance ever where we would give permission to a student to bring a dangerous gun into one of our facilities.
Yeah, I think Alex brought up a really good example of where like you have hunter safety, where perhaps, they bring in a real firearm for something like that. That could be an example where that would be the case. In my own experience as principal, it's largely been around replica devices where a historian would bring something in. So to your point, I do believe it would be incredibly rare for that to happen, but that's what comes to my mind when I read that.
I think, and it completely makes sense, that oftentimes, especially in our day and time, that we're thinking about the school day. These usually happen where an organization has rented out our facilities. They have the permission to be on the property, and it is gun safety, or it is
a gun show.
Yeah, a gun show. And that is where they would have to have permission to have that on the property. or as Nate talked about, for a play or something like that, they'd have to get permission. The key is we really wanted that changed so that I know about that, Assistant Superintendent Swenson knows about that, principal knows about that.
Yeah, which I appreciate that. I just want to, I'm like, I don't want a replica gun at a play to like be as you know, as close to a gun. I don't think that's appropriate for a school setting. So I just want to make sure people aren't reading into this that that is okay no matter what. I get your scenarios, but for dramatic purposes or whatever, we're still an educational institute, and I don't think that it is appropriate for firearms to be present.
I just wanted to make a comment really quickly because we had a very, very in-depth conversation on this particular issue. I'm the one who said, as it was previously written, it left it pretty open for interpretation of who was actually authorized to grant permission for something like this, even though it's highly improbable that it would happen. We were dumbfounded that under constitutional rights as well as equal access requirements and so on and so forth, that our buildings, not necessarily during the school day, but on other non-school day related things, to where we might be forced to grant access to people to bring dangerous weapons on campus. Because by law, we're required to provide that access. Has it happened? No. Do we anticipate it happening? No. Do we are advocating and seeking people to be able to do that? No. But the troubling part is the way the laws are written and certain rights have been adjudicated, I think, in the courts, we're still obligated to be able to do that. And so this is a very sensitive issue that was not lost on the policy committee. And I think the comments that are being heard tonight, right now, we share in them. I think it's a very difficult needle to thread.
Dan.
Real quick on that,
Yeah.
was there any consideration to having Alex being one of the people that approved it or register the weapon as a, like, so that he's tracking?
For like the replica?
Yeah, sorry for the exception.
No,
yeah.
I think we really, it was very broad. It was very broad, and we wanted it narrowed. And I think in most of these situations, if it was a real one, Alex is gonna be called in immediately. I think the replica, we just wanted to make sure someone in, high up in leadership was aware of this. But Alex was not considered.
Yeah, that doesn't preclude us from really talking with Alex and getting more information. If there is going to be something that's considered a dangerous weapon, I need to know about that. Or Nate needs to know about that. And even with the principal, they're gonna notify Nate and me that request is there.
Okay, because the other thing I was worried about was if, let's say an SRO didn't get that notification, or somebody on Alex's team, and somebody made a report to the SRO, and only you or Nate or somebody knew about it, like, is there something that, you know, that point of contact would have the ability to look up and reference and say, this person's authorized to have it on there, on premises, and so therefore not causing a panic and that kind of thing. That's the only context I was bringing up.
That's really good feedback. I had not considered that.
Any other questions?
I think I'd only make one more comment about that, is that this isn't about where, oh, the superintendent or assistant superintendent or principal are obligated to provide that permission, right? So going to what I think Erica was just saying a few minutes ago, I think the general practice is going to be like, no, we're not going to be providing that level of permission and access for dangerous weapons. It would have to be in a pretty extraordinary example of us doing that and making sure that the proper authority has thoughtfully considered what that is. We really wanted to narrow exactly what that was. The communication elements of then, if that was going to be provided permission, leaving the administration to ensure the proper notification to the people that need to know about it, including our leaders in safety.
Board members, any other questions? Just because this is such a robust conversation, and by the way, great questions. These were all brought up in policy. I want to be very clear, it's been said tonight, but I want to be very, very clear to anyone that's watching this that we take your students' safety extremely seriously. And so as you're reading this, some of the responses we had as we were reading it, just know that we were reading it with the same. We vetted this through what we have as rights and what we can limit. And if you're at home watching this and are really bothered by this, please reach out to your legislator and ask for further action around our schools. So, thank you. Okay, 502.
All right, 502 is search of student lockers, desks, personal possessions, and student's person. Again, reviewed by principals and Alex Hatstrom. To be honest with you, most of the changes that are being suggested for this policy are around formatting. The policy is largely intact as you read it, so not suggesting any major changes at all.
Board members, questions on 502?
I have one. So I noticed in Part D, after a student's possessions are searched, the district will notify the student as soon as possible. Just out of curiosity, do we ever notify a student's parents that their possessions have been searched?
You all asked so many of the same questions. This is great. This came up in policy committee too. Best practice is to always notify parents when any type of a search is done. I cannot think of a time when I did not reach out to a parent about a search that I had to do as a principal, whether it be possessions, phone, locker, you name it. Best practice is always to reach out to the parents.
Okay, if it's best practice, should we put it in the policy?
Is
there a reason that's not in there?
We talked about that too. I would not like to position our building administrators in a paper trap for, like, let's say there's an extenuating circumstances where they're unable to reach out to a family because of A, B, or C comes up. I wouldn't, it would be bad to have the policy weaponized against them in that way, especially when they have a right to be able to do it, to be able to keep people safe in the school and stuff like that. So I would caution us from adding the parent part, but know that it is very much so like an expectation.
Okay, I appreciate that response, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that question. Any other questions on 502? All right, hearing none, this will move forward for action at our December meeting. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Swenson. Next up, we have Director of Student Support Services, Jody Remsing, to talk to us about a number of policies.
Microphone.
We're just saying good evening, Vice Chair Gabler and members of the board.
Great. All right. The first one that we're going to talk about this evening is 516 student medication.
Yeah, so there were some updates that were made to this policy in the committee. Some of the updates include including the district's ability to obtain and possess epinephrine auto-injectors to be used under specific circumstances, generally an allergic reaction. The policy also permits the district to obtain epinephrine auto-injectors at either the free market rate, free or reduced prices. Sunscreen was also added to the policy, which permits students to possess and apply their own sunscreen without having a prescription. and additional detail regarding the transport of unclaimed medications that are controlled substances would added to reflect that we need to have law enforcement transport these medications to collection bins that are specific for their disposal. And lastly, there was a written parent permission was added whenever we are transporting controlled substances on field trips. And there were a few other changes that were made, but none of them were substantive in nature.
Board members, questions about this policy? Chair Ellenberg.
Yes, I have a question. We added that section about epinephrine, which I think is great. Is there a reason, or would we want to add Narcan to this? Because we just had that new state law, and I just didn't know why that was excluded. Should it be included? We do, and I just didn't know if they needed to reflect each other.
Hold on, let me, we do have it cross-referenced in here.
Okay.
Is it our overdose one? Do you, well, first let
Because
me
we're
give you an opportunity to respond to that. Do you have a response to that, Jody?
Just that we were going to cross-reference it for the same purposes so that we could check that policy as well.
Do you feel like it should be specifically called out?
I just didn't know, because we're specifically calling out epinephrine and our right to, in good faith, give epinephrine, and I just didn't know, since we're specifically calling out epinephrine, why we wouldn't call out our right to give Narcan.
I think this is because it's actually student medication. So like a student would have an EpiPen prescribed to them, where you're probably not going to have students in your high school with, they're not gonna have a prescription for Narcan.
So I read this differently, that, and this could be my misinterpretation of it, that the district can obtain and possess epinephrine auto-injectors. So that to me read that unrelated to a student prescription, as a district, we would have epinephrine on site in case a student has a severe anaphylactic reaction, and then we can use that medication.
I see the part you're looking at, sure.
So I
think that the reason for that is because we have a policy specific to Narcan.
Okay.
We don't have a policy specific to these other medications.
That's fine. Thank you.
Does that work for you, or would you want it to be specifically called out?
That works for me.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. And a lot of the policy is, yes, it's about, sometimes there's policy and then there's the actual procedures, and yes, we want them to align, but there's also a legal piece to this, and so that cross-referencing gives us that little bit of protection. Thank you for that question. Any other questions on 516?
Oh, I just had a quick question. Does the administration of medication on field trips, does that include extended travel, overnight stays?
That was my understanding, that it's all field trips.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, then this will move forward for next month for approval. And then we are moving on to policy 605, alternative programs and services. Oh.
I'll stay close.
Director of Teaching and Learning, Jody D. St. Hubert.
Thank you, Chair Gabler. In this policy 605, the updates have been made to match the MSBA policy. So the main one to point out is under number 4, responsibility. A, there's an additional added there, and then there's just a couple of tweaks to the words throughout.
All right, any questions on this one? Okay, great, then this will move forward. I'm sorry, I got my Jody's mixed up.
That's okay.
All right, back to Jody Rumsing. We will look at policy 607, special accommodation services.
Okay, so the recommendation is that we remove this policy and that we sunset it because it's duplicative in nature with policy 521, which covers student disability and non-discrimination. As part of the policy committee meeting, we went through and just kind of made sure that all of the areas were covered in that policy, and so it really is duplicative in nature for us to have 2 policies addressing the same issues.
And board members, before we take questions, what we've found in policy over the last several years is that there was a period in our district where there was a lot of policies being created sometimes for different situations, and we've found as we're trying to streamline and make sure that they're user-friendly, that there are these situations, and you've all been on the board when this has happened, where we've had to sunset policies. So this is one of those cases where it's already in our policies, just.
And Jody, you did speak with Amy Mace about this as well. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I reached out to Amy Mason. I just asked her because I had some concerns with the policy and asked her if she saw any reason for it or if she took any issue with any of the revisions or things like that. And she said, no, I agree with you and I recommend sunsetting this policy. And then I also reviewed other neighboring districts around, and they also only have a policy similar to 521. No other district that we really compare to in any other way had a policy that resembled 607.
Chair Ellenberg.
So my only comment is, I didn't understand why this was being rescinded, and I had no idea it had anything to do with 528, so I haven't had a chance to really look to see if there's differences or anything that I have a concern about. Yep. And so I would like the opportunity to maybe
No, that's fair.
look at it through that lens, because my question was, why are we rescinding this?
Yep.
So.
Board, would you be okay if first of all, I should ask, is there any reason that this needs to be approved? Is there a time calendar for this one?
No, this is not time sensitive.
Okay. So board, would you be okay if we push this to discussion in December and you had an opportunity? Jody, can you restate which policy you feel like this mimics?
Yeah, so policy 521, student disability non-discrimination, really covers 504 and the prohibition of discrimination based upon disability.
Great. And board members, I will send you an email with all of this in there just so that you have links to both of them so that you don't have to remember it's 521. So. Okay. Ann, would you send that? Thank you.
There was a really solid document that Jody provided, which did a side-by-side compare and contrast, and I wonder if we provide that, if you could give that to Ann, and Ann provides that as well. I think that would be really helpful, so that information is there. I mean, it was really helpful.
That'd be
for
great.
us.
I'd appreciate that.
Okay, then we will move on to policy 608, instructional services, special education.
The only substantive change made to this policy was to include the district's ability to conduct a standalone evaluation for developmental adaptive physical education without opening up a new comprehensive special education evaluation. This change aligns with the Minnesota rule, with new Minnesota rule in effort to reduce special education paperwork.
Board members, any questions on 608? Okay, this will move forward then for action in December. And the last one this evening is policy 636, workload limits for certain special education teachers.
And there are no substantive changes proposed to that policy either.
Board members, any questions? Okay, great, then this one will move forward. Thank you, Jody. There was a lot to go over.
Thank you, Director Remsing and Policy Committee. I appreciate that. That concludes our discussion items. We're going to move on to our action items. Do I have a motion to approve the total semester graduation credits required for graduating from Edina High School increasing from 43 to 44?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I would like to welcome Director D. St. Hubert and Edina High School Principal Paul Paetzel. And before they get up here and we get on this discussion, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that a little birdie told me it might be your birthday. And I know that all you ever wanted to do for your birthday was come to an Edina School Board meeting.
And work session.
And work session. And so thank you for spending your evening here, and happy birthday. No one would ever want me to sing publicly or privately, so we won't sing, but happy birthday.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
I
didn't even know.
I won't tell you who told me. So.
All right, thank you.
And I'll turn it over to Director D. St. Hubert.
Okay, good evening, Dr. Stanley, Chair Ellenberg, Board Directors. Principal Paetzel, birthday individual, and I are here tonight to take action on the recommendation to increase graduation credits from 43 to 44 due to the new legislation requiring a finance credit. This topic was brought to the board for discussion on 8/20, 9/24, and 10/7. There is one new slide added. It was noted that there were two in the attachments, but there is one on slide 25, and it just expands on a data point that has been discussed in all of our other discussions. That data point stated that over half of our students are graduating with 50 or more credits, and that the slide, shows you that the actual percentage in 2024 of students that graduated with 50 or more credits was 69.16%. Those that graduated with 48 or 49 was 14.83. Those that graduated with 45 to 47 was 6.17. And then those that graduated 44 or 43 was 4.26. So just to give a little bit more concrete information on that general statement that we had presented before. And those that were at 43 or fewer credits was 5.58%. So with that new information and past previous information and discussions, I'll leave it open to the board for questions or comments.
Board members, what comments do you have or questions do you have regarding this topic before we vote on it? Director Aram?
I just want to say thanks for that additional slide. That was helpful for me when kind of reviewing things. And then in light of our conversation about pathways and stuff, I just, want to be cognizant of, the impacts of that and the potential piece for this, so.
Director Gabler?
I was pausing over here. I think if anybody's watching this or watching this afterwards, it is important to reference what Director D. St. Hubert said. We have been discussing this now for a couple of months, and there's a lot of information out there to kind of tell the story, because we sometimes forget when we're dealing with this that if you're just tuning in now, there's been a whole host of discussions that might get you up to speed on this. I've been I think I've raised my questions in the past, and you've been great about answering that. I think that what your reporting has showed us is that there's still a lot of information or a lot of ideas that we could suss out with this in terms of the reason that we're here discussing this tonight is because the state has said we're adding a personal finance, which I think most people are thrilled about. We're here having to have a conversation of if we take away that FIED credit. And I think you've done a great job of showing us information and scenarios about our high school graduation experience and credits as a whole. And I think we have some room with the research that you've shown us, or this information that you've shown us, to further study our physical education opportunities. So I'm voting tonight to increase our credit loads for several reasons. Our strat plan being one. We know how important physical education is to those well-rounded students that we talk about. Educator voice. The lead team, which is not just FIED teachers, are recommending this. And really time. I think if we're really going to take a comprehensive look at pathways, and we just looked at social studies, I said it at our first meeting, I need a longer runway to really dig into this. There were some options or like further option slides where it was like, could we allow athletes to get credit? Could we look at, we just heard about pathways with CPR. Well, could that be a FIED class? Some of that where I think there's a potential where we can make this a win-win. And I don't think we're right there yet, so I'm not ready to take that credit away. With that being said, I feel like I need to have the justification of why. Why do we go above and beyond what the state requires? And I think we have that in our personal values. I know all of my board members have struggled with this conversation, but if we're gonna go above, if we're saying 2, then let's make sure we have really outstanding reasons for that and programming around that and students' engagement that say, yeah, I really got a lot out of those classes. So I think there's an opportunity there. I would love for us to be able to dig into that a little bit more and not have this conversation end tonight. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Director Gabler. Director Birdman?
And I just wanted to repeat something I said, I think, last month. Well, this is a difficult position that we're in to have to make this decision because I don't think anyone feels great about it in terms of which direction we go. And there's risks or unintended consequences both directions. And I've come through a lot of this process over the last few months as to the impact it has for people on choice, the impact as it has for our strategic plan and what we say a well-rounded graduate includes as far as wellness. What I said last time is that we're making a decision tonight, but it's not the end-all be-all forever. Let's do this decision, as Director Gabler just said. Let's really make sure we're learning what's working, what's not working, and if necessary, not only come back with information about it, but if we, for whatever reason, the unintended consequences were a lot worse than we thought they would be based on what we choose to do here tonight, whichever direction it is, we can change it. And not that we want to be in the business of constantly changing things around graduation requirements, because that's not a really good strategy. With something like this where we don't have perfect information, we shouldn't be anchored to any one decision that's made tonight, because we are constantly evolving and understanding where we're at. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that one more time before we take action. Thank you.
So I agree with what my colleague said. I think the thing I'm struggling with the most about this is our students at our high school and the amount of stress and pressure they're under. And I agree with Director Gabler. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for a change to the state, no matter how many people like personal finance. We've been put in a position to do this in a very quick amount of time without having enough time to really look at things holistically and how we can make flexible options. I'm just really struck by the amount of pressure students put on themselves. We can say to ourselves something like this doesn't matter that much, but onboarding multiple students to college, the pressure and messages that students get about what they need to do to get to a college, it's really unfair to our students. And I appreciated on our discovery presentation tonight referencing the Minnesota Student Survey, and I actually looked up our 11th grade stress levels, and 77% of our 11th graders report that they've felt nervous, anxious, or on edge in the last 2 weeks, compared with 69% of the rest of the state. And I think that's because we're in a high pressure. The excellence of Edina comes with a cost. And I don't want to do anything to contribute to that. And my concern is this adding another graduation credit is going to contribute to that, the mental health and wellness. There's a balance. If they had another PE class, would that help? I don't know the answer to that. I would like to challenge my board members that as this stands, I don't know if I can approve increasing our graduation credits for that reasons. However, I could vote to increase our graduation credits with the caveat that a year from now or a year and a half from now, before these students that are impacted, you guys are given the opportunity to look at how can we provide flexibility for students whether it's PE, whether it's personal finance, taking into consideration that holistic look at our students and what's impacting them, which you guys just haven't had enough time to do. And I just want to make sure it very clear, I'm not faulting you guys for that. It's the timing we were given from the state. So I could approve this if that was part of the approval, that it would be a yes and we need to look into more flexible options and taking pathways into consideration and really doing a deep dive into our graduation requirement experience. And I just wanted to see what the rest of the board thought about that.
I would concur with that. I think the question really is to administration is it reasonable that you would be able to do that? So I agree 100% with that, but are you able to actually commit that you'd be able to effectively look at those flexibilities, provide something back to us to where if we needed to modify something, we'd be able to before it has the impact that Chair Allenberg just described?
You know, I think it's a double track agenda that we'd be talking about. Remind me, Jody, when personal finance is required 25, 26?
It's for, yes, it's for the current ninth graders need to take it in 10th, 11th, or 12th.
So starting in 25, 26.
So the challenge there would be the fact that when you're talking about the curriculum and the catalog for 25, 26, we typically finish that towards the end of this year, very early. Right, yeah, I mean, so I think the question is that the class itself is not necessarily the question. The problem is that we probably wouldn't have enough time to come up with applying the credit for, athletics and whatever it is to something or whatever it might be. That's where that's going to be more time. So go
Not
ahead.
for next year, just to be clear, not for next year.
Okay.
There's nothing we can do for next year. I'm saying for a year from now, knowing that we've just have told this year's freshmen, you now have to take an additional personal finance class. Can we, a year from now, come back and say, yes, you still have to take these 44 credits, but now we've opened up these flexible ways for you to do that. Or maybe a year or a year and a half from now, the answer is we've looked at everything and we just don't think any of that's a good idea. And then maybe we'll have the opportunity to relook at the pathways and everything like that. Maybe our answer still is, this is the best thing to do. I want to give our administration time to look at some of these things that they haven't had enough time to look at, knowing for this year, we can't do or change anything unless we decide tonight to reduce the credits.
Yeah, I mean, the only last comment I would make is that from the work sessions and the other conversations we've been having over this last few months, there seemed to be, and hopefully everyone else will chime in, there seemed to be interest that, yes, if we could figure out flexibility about how we could apply this credit across different things, if we could do that, I think there seemed to be a lot of favorable impression that we would like to do that. The question really just is, can we effectively do that?
Director Berman, just for clarity, are you talking about for finance or are you talking about for FIED?
I'm thinking about, we talked in different parts, either one or both, knowing that there are some things that we could possibly do, some things we can't do. So for example, I think there was something about the personal finance that had certain requirements that trying to blend it with something else, we didn't have a lot of flexibility with that. Whereas within physical education wellness, there was a lot of innovative ideas about what we might be able to do with that. But again, did it meet the standards that the MDE requires us to do? So it's probably less on the finance side, Dr. Stanley, than it is on the PE side. The question would be is, who knows, maybe with innovation, we could come up with something on the personal finance side that we could do, but I don't know that to be true. So it's really giving you guys the opportunity to examine that a little bit further and say, really, there's nothing we can do on personal finance, but we could legitimately do these 2 or 3 things on the personal or physical education wellness side that meets what we're talking about. That's what I remember in the dialogue that we've had. So I would love to hear if I read that correctly of the rest of the board. Is that kind of how it stood, or people kind of felt, no, that's not where that was going?
I guess my question would be, our administration, our staff gave us those recommendations. Did they already feel that they gave us that information? Are we just saying we didn't maybe like that information and we want different information is my only concern? Or do we want it to go farther? Because I don't want to send staff back with the charge of, hey, give us this report again. And I don't know if that was a report that they gave to us more of, we have this set of time and these are the best options we have in this amount of time, or if they felt that was a holistic report and these are the recommendations and we recommend that we add one. And
I love that question.
I lean toward, I feel like they gave us that report already for some degree, but I'm willing to have that discussion if it is something where we feel like they weren't able to maybe go as deep as they wanted or we wanted them to. But.
I mean, it's an awkward position, right? And this is what I will say. I believe that the team had a lot of questions over the past couple of months, starting in August. Really important to note that Jody actually started this work May, probably, June, probably. You know, we had a short period of time there where we really couldn't bring teachers in because they were off for the summer. But there's a significant amount of time that went into this. I believe what we're bringing forward as administration is what we believe is what's best right now. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. I believe it was a comprehensive look, and what we're bringing forward is what we believe is what's best right now. If the board wants to change, I think you have to decide that.
Okay, so understanding now we are going to vote on this tonight. I think it's hard for me to come out of the work session when we're talking about all of these new additions that we'd like to bring on board. And, you know, if you take these 5 classes and then you get to do something, a really cool experience, well, where's that gonna go? I think we're running up into a math problem. And I think from that report, bringing student voice into this conversation, when we're hearing that it is an additional stress for a significant number of students to participate in gym class during the school day, I have a hard time voting to increase the school credits. And I heard you, Director Gabriel, last time when you said, well, you know, kids don't like math either, and they take math.
Not all kids.
But
Lots of kids like math.
that's true, lots do like math. But the difference in my mind is that, you know, with math, we're teaching you the right way to get to the right answer, and there's a right answer. And when we're talking about personal wellness, there is not a right answer for everyone. And what I do for fitness and wellness, which is really important to my mental health, and I take that very seriously, it looks very different than what anybody else does. And even though I love what I do, would I want to do it in the middle of a work day? I don't know. So that's kind of where my thinking is.
Any comments from other board members? Director Huvie?
We can only make decisions on what we know today. Things we were talking about in the work session are not today. Those are future. And removing the requirement for the second PE class today would also cause a disruption because there, was it half of the requirements? Or like they're kind of split, right? So you'd have to find where do we put those other standards within somebody's, a teacher's curriculum, teaching, or find someplace else for them, so that is also disruptive. And so in my mind, what I know today, it makes the most sense to increase the credit level, going on what Director Birdman was saying earlier. Down the road, there may be different decisions made because there's a different reality in front of us. And from where I sit today, it makes the most sense to add the credit. And I would hope that we would see this as a way for students to have those experiences or find those relief mechanisms that maybe they don't know about today even, because they haven't experienced whatever that class is or learned, because it's health and it's like wellness. It's not just about physical activity. It's also about learning nutrition and how to manage some of those things. I learned a lot helping my son through some of these online courses. And we do have some flexibility. There are online options, there are different things. But I would ask if we can be a little bit more creative and flexible for some of the credit. As we were saying, a lot of students are already involved in athletics and different things. So future me would like to see that. Today me, from where I sit today, with the reality today, I would support the add additional credit.
Anything else from board members? I'm going to ask for a roll call vote so I can actually see who's voting for what. Or can you do that? Thank you very much, so I don't forget people.
Can you clarify what, like a yes and a no?
A yes means that you're voting to increase the graduation requirements from 43 to 44, and no vote means that it would stay at 43, so we would be removing a PE requirement.
Do they do separate votes for that?
I don't think so, no.
Allenberg,
No.
Aram,
Yes.
Barry,
No.
Birdman,
Yes.
Gabler,
Yes.
Hoovy,
Yes.
Mann.
Yes.
So on a vote of 5 to 2, the recommendation passes to increase the graduation requirements from 43 to 44. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the READ Act Professional Development Memorandum of Understanding?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Director D. St. Hubert and Director Saylor, welcome.
Thank you. Dr. Stanley, Chair Allenberg, board members, Executive Director Sonia Salier and I are excited to share the READ Act Professional Development Training MOU report with all of you for action tonight. The background on the cover letter highlights a timeline for the science of reading, specifically that professional development in Edina. Edina started the science of reading PD in 2021. Even before that was some pilot and pockets of teachers doing that work. But in 2021, we committed to having all of our K through 3, our EL, our special ed, and our intervention staff specifically working in reading, all trained in the science of reading in alignment with our Edina Early Learning through 12 Comprehensive Literacy Plan. Our teachers can't speak enough about how highly motivated and collaborative they were in jumping into this professional development. Then, a couple years later, we had 2023, phase 1 of the READ Act was passed, legislatively requiring all staff to have science of reading professional development. We were well underway with this work at that time, and yet there were some important parts of legislation for us to review and make sure we were in alignment with. And then recently, in 2024, we had another phase of the statutory requirement to negotiate compensation for teachers in relation to the training on the science of reading. So the MOU is specific to that compensation for teachers in specific for their professional development in the science of reading. When we started our commitment for all in 2021, we worked very, very closely with EME, with Human Resources, and we determined from the get-go that we would be compensating our teachers for any work done outside of their school time or their work time at their daily rate. And so the plan in front of you is a reflection of that plan that we have had in place since 2021. I appreciate the partnership with Executive Director Saylor and Jason Doctor both in just finalizing the details and the wording and make sure we're acknowledging the significant amount of time and commitment that our teachers have demonstrated in this work. Would you like to add anything?
The only thing I'd like to add is a reflection of the really hard work that Director D. St. Hubert has done here. In HR, because this first went into place, the READ Act in 2023, and then of course the requirement of the MOU in 2024, had many, many emails from colleagues in many other districts. What are you going to do? What training are you going to do? Which program are you picking? How are you going to pay? And the fact that this was almost old news for us at this point. We've been doing this for 3 years. Director D. St. Hubert, all of those things that had already been established and we were that much further ahead, right? It was nice to be able to say that. So that's all I wanted to mention as well.
So for action tonight, are there any points of discussion or questions?
I'll just echo what Director Saylor said. Thank you for your work on this and all our educators. It's greatly appreciated. We will now vote to approve the READ Act Professional Development MOU. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion passes and it is approved. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the 2024-2025 collective bargaining agreement between Independent School District 273 and the Edina Administration Council?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Director Saylor and Director Woodard.
So Chair Ellenberg, Dr. Stanley, members of the board, Director Woodard and I are pleased to announce that the Edina Administrative Council, which is otherwise known as our principals and our assistant principals in our school district, have ratified a tentative agreement for a new contract effective July 1, 2024 and through June 30th, 2026. Our negotiations teams worked collaboratively to align compensation and benefits with our comparison school districts in the metropolitan area while also respecting the school board's financial parameters. Financial highlights of the proposed agreement include step advancement for eligible principals and assistant principals in both years of the agreement with retroactive application to July 1, 2024. A market adjustment in the first year of the agreement to provide principals and assistant principals with comparable salaries to our district's comparison school districts, and a 2% increase in the second year. In exchange for the first year market adjustment and elimination of the early retirement payments provision, often referred to as severance, for all principals and assistant principals who had not already qualified for the benefit as of June 30th, 2024. An increase of $62.42 per month towards the district's contribution towards single health insurance, beginning with the 2025 calendar year, and removal of the cap on the $4,250 cap on the 3% employer match towards the district's 403B plan. Using the Minnesota School Boards Association's costing formula, the 2-year percentage increase is 12.71%. It's important to note that these amount does not reflect the future savings the district will recognize due to the change in the early retirement payment provision. This tentative agreement is within the authority provided to us, the school district's negotiations team by the school board, and as a result, we seek your approval for this agreement. Do you have any questions?
Questions, comments from board members? Okay, we will now vote to approve the 2024-2026 collective bargaining agreement between Independent School District 273 and the Edina Administrative Council. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The 2024-2026 collective bargaining agreement is approved. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the 2024-2026 collective bargaining agreement between Independent School District 273 and the Service Employees International Union?
So moved.
284, representing transportation employees.
Sorry, I didn't realize it was that long. My bad.
Second.
So moved, sorry.
Moved by Director Bergman prematurely and seconded by Director Aram. Director Saylor and Director Woodard.
So we're also pleased to announce that the Service Employees International Union, our transportation employees, have ratified a tentative agreement for the same time period, July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2026. So our transportation employees include, of course, our bus drivers. They also include our route programmers and bus mechanics and our interschool mail driver. The financial highlights of the proposed agreement include step advancement in both years of the agreement for eligible employees, a 7% hourly wage increase in the first year and a 3% increase in the second year. Beginning January 1, 2025, the district's monthly contribution towards health insurance will increase by $73.57 for single plans, $24.60 for single plus one, and $25.43 for family plans. The paid vacation provision will be eliminated for school term, our 9-month employees, in exchange for 9 paid holidays, with summer bus drivers earning 1 additional paid holiday if they meet the summer hour driving requirements. Using the Minnesota School Boards Association's costing formula, the 2-year percentage is 8.62%. This tentative agreement is also within the authority provided to the district's negotiations team by the school board, and as a result, we seek your approval. Do you have any questions?
I don't have questions. I wanted to thank you both for your work getting all of these bargaining agreements done and within parameters of the board. Really appreciate it. You both are outstanding at your jobs, so thank you. We will now vote to approve the 2024 to 2026 collective bargaining agreement between ISD 273 and the Service Employees International Union, Local 284, representing transportation employees. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The collective bargaining agreement is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to approve policies 418, 507, 507.5, 508, 512, 516.5?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Director Gabler.
Yes, thanks, Chair Ellenberg. The policies before you for action tonight were brought to you in the October meeting. There are no changes to what you have before you tonight.
Board members, questions or comments on these policies before we vote? Okay. We will now vote to approve policies 418, 507, 507.5, 508, 512, 516.5. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Policies 418, 507, 507.5, 508, 512, and 516.5 have been approved. And that concludes our action items. Do any board members or committee leads have updates for us tonight? Director Aram.
Just that we have our rescheduled date for LAC facility tours to November 21st.
And LAC is our Legislative Action Committee, for anyone that doesn't know the acronym. Thank you. Anyone else? Director Stanley, do you have any superintendent updates?
I do. First of all, we got number 207. Way to go, boys. I know. Who was that? That was, yes, that was fantastic. We're, gosh, super excited about that. Boys cross country. Congratulations, boys cross country. They will be coming in, hopefully next month, to be celebrated and to be acknowledged by the board. And so we're excited about that. The other thing that I would like to highlight is the art display, the art that is on display in the room. Concord art teacher Michelle Singer, she wanted to let you know that Concord's display showcases a variety of grades and mediums. First grade is showcasing bright sunflowers made with oil pastel blendings. Second grade and third grade experimented with color blending in their chalk pastel landscapes and bubbles, and fifth grade used cut paper to create Japanese no-tan designs while learning about positive and negative space balance and contrast. Cornelia's teachers, Shannon Stephen, Jenna Wello, for their students, the paintbrushes were created by Cornelia's fourth graders. They were studying artist Jim Dine and his work, focusing on tools. Students were given many paintbrushes to draw from life. Then they created shadows using permanent markers and pencils. They used watercolor to splatter and brush on bright colors to finish them. Second graders created the shoe designs at Cornelia. They also used their observation skills to add details from their shoes. Last, they colored it with colored pencils to show their personality. The abstract paintings were done by fourth graders practicing their painting techniques with watercolor. And finally, from Normandale, Madame, I think it's Madame, Mademoiselle, Leanne French Amara, Mademoiselle. Oh, it's Madame, okay. The fifth grade artists at Normandale created their own paintings after learning about the Mexican folk art of amate paintings during Hispanic Heritage Month. Amate, meaning paper, is handmade from the pulp of fig and mulberry trees, then drawn and painted on. Normandale artists created their own designs and drawings and painted these detailed works using neon paints in the same style as the traditional amate bark paintings. Whenever I am out in schools, I always go to our art classes because our art teachers are absolutely phenomenal. The kids are so engaged. I really get drawn in, and I try to do some of the art myself. I say I have a growth mindset around my artwork, and just always impressed with the works that are provided for the boardroom.
Thank you, Dr. Stanley. With that concludes our meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.